Parental separation can be tough, and the idea of having to navigate a co-parenting relationship with someone that you don't like can be even more overwhelming. But you don't have to navigate this on your own. We welcome you to the White Table discussion, where we bring to you real life stories with real people discussing subjects, stories, most importantly, also the heartfelt messages of parents and children. Most important, every week we will have professionals to give you advice and guidance, but also bring you some of those other people maybe like yourself that have already been where you are now, to help to guide and give you some advice at that level of understanding from the emotional home. Most important, if you're here to hang around and hear us a little bit more, every week we will be bringing you stories. All you need to do is hit that subscribe button so that we can do more for you and helping to build this community whilst we've been running now in our 5th year of the White Table Discussion Project. My name's Jeannie. I'm your host and the founder of Parenting Together Apart for Parents Not Together. I look forward to seeing you inside. Hi everyone, my name's Jeannie from Parenting Together Apart for Parents Not Together. Welcome to our White Table Discussion podcast, and we've got the beautiful Ange Beasley who's joining us today, family dispute mediator as well as parenting coordinator, and I think it would be fair to say a superpower mum as well. So welcome Ange, thanks for meeting with us today.
Thanks, Jeannie.
That's all right. And I think today we want to cover, because, it'd be fair to say that Ange is like the queen of the neurodiverse families and, just navigating through that process. So we'll, chat about a couple of different topics, but I think primarily to talk about one of the things that Ange and I were sharing earlier was around, neurodiverse families and, the perspective of parents of to the other around what care arrangement in terms of time looks like. So if initially the dynamic has been where both parents have been one may be working, one predominantly maybe have been organizing appointments, and for example, has been more time at home whilst the other parent is financially contributing, separation happens. And obviously now then we have those decisions that have to be made around what the care arrangements would look like, and how these will be coordinated, etc. So I would like to share or get your input on that, and from your experiences with other families, but also with yourself, like how, because we always say, well, if both parents have capacity and children are safe, well, there's no reason why equal share care, which I see the positives in that, especially if children have got some, additional care that's required. It would be helpful to give parents respite care in an organic way. So, what's your experience, Ange, on that and in the
Yeah,
different
so
families?
I guess the most important part for neurodivergent families is recognizing the unique needs that they have, that their communication styles are usually quite different, and their cognitive processing as well, is different. So in regards to their needs, in 50-50 arrangements, or any arrangement for that matter, there needs to be a lot of forward planning, and it needs to be very carefully considered so that the structure that you put in place can be sustained when the wheels fall off, because inevitably that happens. So we need structure, we need predictability and sustainability for these families. When it comes to, one person staying at home predominantly and caring for the children, yes, they do, just by virtue of that arrangement, typically have a greater understanding of the needs of the child. But that's not to say that the other party can't acquire that. And sometimes it just takes a bit of effort, and trying to work collaboratively with the parent that, is primarily on board. I guess where I see some challenges with that arrangement, especially 50-50, is the financial impact. So, some families are loath to change up any arrangements because it's going to impact them from a child support perspective. And, that unfortunately is the reality of the situation. They don't want to lose anything. So any change in shared care will ultimately, impact their back pocket. And that's where you get people that just refuse to change, even when it's in the best interest of the children.
Course. And what about where, and from our experience, we also see as where ages could also be quite directive to how that looks like. So, for example, your preschoolers, so children that are at home full time versus children that are going to school during the day. Would it be fair to say that the probability of 50-50 or a increased time, whether it's just, 60-40, whatever that may look like, may be likely to be achievable because the children are predominantly going to school during the week. So do you see a difference in the age dynamics? And of course, then we've
Yeah.
got secondary school. Yeah.
Most definitely. However, there is still quite a significant caring requirement from the parents because almost, you know, in all of families that have neurodiverse components, there's specialist appointments to attend and there's therapy to attend. So you've got speech pathology, you've got occupational therapy, you've got psychology. Those are just, the more common therapies that are utilized by families with those situations. And those appointments are really hard to get. So, we've got waiting lists that, for months, months and months, and you need to get into a pattern and a routine to be able to lock in a regular schedule with those treating practitioners. And unfortunately, it can mean that you have to actually take your child out of school to attend and then try to pop them back into school. With the neurodivergent child, that can be really difficult because they're having to adjust to being removed from school and then adjust to go back into school. And in high school, they're potentially going to another class in another location within the school grounds. And they've just not had that opportunity to settle in and, feel comfortable and confident and a part of the group. So that can be particularly challenging. Furthermore, if you're able to get an appointment outside of school hours, then again, it's typically going to impact on somebody's work day or impact on other children being able to be cared for or picked up. So, there's still a considerable amount of caring that's required.
It's interesting because I think one of the prompt uh, challenges we see with this is around the appointments and the understanding that the appointments are not dictated by the parents but dictated by the practitioners. So and there's a miscommunication between, especially parents where there's conflict, where there's the assumption that the other parents just made that appointment on my time on purpose, whereas we communicate to say, well, actually, no, the practitioner was probably fitting you both in or fitting the child in at a time that suits them. And as you said, because time, the limitations, the resources are so challenged, it makes a whole lot of sense around um, you know, these additional conversations that we definitely have to have with these families to help them understand how they navigate, through those processes. So, what would be like, if in your view, what would be your ideal scenario for a family? And if we went through the blocks of preschool, primary school age, secondary school. So for the preschool, what would be the things you look out for to suggest the best arrangement for a family that have got children that are not in school yet, where both parents have separated, amicably are separated, but are seeking out, at maximum time, let's say, with the children as best they can. What would you seek out, knowing your direct experience as a mother and step parent to neurodiverse family or children?
Hmm. Um, it's a bit of a tricky
And it's not
one.
a pigeonhole. We have to understand to the viewers, it's not a pigeonhole answer. So this is why the pause, but it's more of an overview understanding of, you know, like I know how we approach this. I'd like to know how you would approach that situation. What are the boxes you'd like to see as it, checked
Mm.
in? Yeah.
So I guess always at the forefront of my mind is what's in the best interest of the children,
Yes,
and
of course.
having to relay that message to the carers or parents is critical in that perspective. From a caring arrangement, typically in the younger years, so preschool years and even younger, one parent would more likely have greater care arrangements than the other. So we do see things like 70-30, etc. However, it's really important that both parties attend medical appointments. Both parties are informed of outcomes of therapies. Both parties are on board for any medication that's administered. And that in itself can be a real nightmare because uh, your GP will typically issue one script. So one party has the ownership of the script for, a particular medication. And then it's the onus is on them to make sure that that's filled, et cetera, et cetera. So those things are, I guess, critical for me. And also to ensuring that the environment or the home environment is somewhat similar. Between both households because familiarity and replication and uh, um, expectations, etc., etc., are really important for little people, especially with additional needs, and they need to know that I've got everything I need there and everything I need there. And so that's something else that we look at. If the living arrangements were going to be completely, polar opposite, that would be quite alarming because that's going to be a challenge for a little person on the spectrum to be able to adjust their mindset to adapt to that.
And what about children that are at primary school age, Ange? Like, what's your take
Mm.
on that, where we now have children where, there's been a bit of freed up of time for parents, so they're not tied down like they would be for before school. So
Mm.
again, how would you approach that if two parents come along, and
So
what would
it's
that
it's a
be?
lot easier in some regard. It's a lot easier that from a 50-50 shared arrangement, it's structured in a way that there's a drop off at school and a pick up from school, week about type of arrangement. Everything that the child needs goes with them in their school bag or another bag or whatnot, and they transition fairly smoothly. I would still suggest that for therapy, medical, and any other types of practitioner appointments. That both parents can be present. And if they can't, then the information is relayed to the other. Um, the wonders of, having video conferencing and things like that and telehealth appointments now has made life a lot easier for somebody, like one parent is at work in the city, for example, and they can just dial in and still be part of that conversation, which is really, really important. So yeah, it gets easier in that regard of 50-50 shared arrangements from primary school and high school, but then a whole lot of other dynamics come into it as well, which is all the sorts of things that I guess I cover usually in my role as a parenting coordinator. So that's, things like, first sleepovers, who agrees on the age that can happen, or, different friendship groups, or can they get public transport on their own? And is that, is that suitable for them? But also, is it a reasonable expectation or arrangement for each of the parties? Um, And then, there's this a raft of things, part-time jobs, boyfriends, girlfriends, etc. Going to spend time at the local, shopping mall, on their own. And that's where it's really important that the parents can work collaboratively together. And unfortunately, it's not the case in many families. Um, but yeah.
So when you've got a parent, for example, where they have been shut out through the process through the assessment process, and and also they're experiencing a different child. We also see this theme where a child, for example, is uh, having a very different response measure with that parent as opposed to the parent that they have primarily lived with. What does that look like on your perspective? Because, some of the challenges that we see is where the primary parent then becomes quite adamant about sharing information, providing
Mm.
information. The other parent then is either reliant to try to go through their own discovery. They'll learn after the fact. Um, so how does that dynamic then work in your perspective around that? Like, how would one manage those kinds of family dynamic?
It's really tough. There's often, no matter how collaborative and amicable parents of a child or children appear to be, there's always a lot of dirt under the carpet. So it can be, we look at coercive control, in that regard, and it's baggage that each of them have. So that naturally comes through, unfortunately, with restricting information or, refusing to, increase time, or be flexible around arrangements, etc. And that's where I just have to continually go back to what's in the best interest of the children. These children didn't ask for this to happen, and it might be in their best interest that these two parents are not together. But they don't see that. They don't understand that. They just see that they potentially have contributed to a problem. So it's reminding the parents that it's they're here for the kids. What's in their best interests, and um, it's they're not pawns. The children aren't pawns in a game, and they need to really recognise that. The damage that can be done to developing brains, developing personalities, etc.
The NDIS, if we may touch on that briefly, obviously, is a thing that is here to stay, and obviously
Unfortunately.
it has also, I think, fueled quite different dynamics in families. And one of the things that we see is parents who engage in the NDIS applications and are successful are then trying to force, let's say, the other parent to take advantage of some of those support services, where if that other parent is actually, you know, in that moment, maybe having, doing quite well with the child. So there's lesser, challenges where the child may not be physically abusive towards them, and whereas the other parent may need support. you know, One of the other themes we see is, the parent who seeked out all the NDIS application and the funding and so forth become very frustrated that the other parent is not taking advantage of the support worker or support work, but also can't seem to see that maybe it's not necessary if things are already working really well in that moment.
Mm.
So how do you navigate that for these families? Because tends to be this, this just idea and the ideals of that parent, let's say number one, who's really having a hard time shifting, that it's not that the parent is saying, the other parent too is not saying no, they're just saying, I don't need it. I'm coping right now. we're under
Mm.
control. So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, as I mentioned, they've got a lot of baggage, these people that I see. Um, and I guess still tends to be a lot of distrust between separated parents. And so, parent one, um, whilst parent two says, they don't need the support, everything's hunky-dory at their house and all good, and parent one has a, nightmare time trying to get children to bed and in cars and wear uniforms and things like
Yes,
that.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
they just say, well, they're just letting them get away with everything over at your house. That's why you don't need the support because you just let them get away with everything. Or they say, you don't recognize the needs of our child, and therefore, you're incompetent as a parent because you're not taking advantage of the therapy that they need. Um, in more cases than not, though, I see the parent who's sought out NDIS and has made the effort and got the reports and referrals, etc., to put together an application and then has been successful, typically wants to use all the funding for themselves. So there's you know I've seen it a couple of times now where you've got the funding packages look very different, and you might have somebody that's got quite significant funding and they are using the funding to renovate their kitchen, and the other party is a renter, and so they have no kitchen to renovate, but they want some of that funding. And parent one is very guarded around that. And unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to financial gain.
And I guess I'm bringing I know I'm bringing you some difficult examples, but these are some of the realities that we are coming across, and I know you're coming across that are, you know, there's definitely a crack where it somehow needs to be talked about because we're seeing
Mm,
it. And again, it's not also to discriminate for those that have got good intention, but it's also about, if a parent is coping well in that moment, as long as they are, our view is as long as they're making sure those kids turn up to the appointments that are required, that are required for them. If, for example, the component of support at home, if it's not necessary in that moment, it's also okay. And I think
mm,
most, parents will cry out and say, hey, I think I need to take advantage because, as you know, these kids come in waves of temperaments. And so,
mm,
then you add on the neurodivergence. So what you have is both the element of what we call the normal child, the child, like you said, that's
mm,
now heading towards own friendships, wanting a boyfriend, etc., wanting to head out on their own. And then you've also got the dynamic of knowing that there are extra special needs that have to be taken in consideration. And as long as the parents allow that space to be able to see what that looks like and then make informed decisions, but the basis of their medical appointments are seen to. We don't
maintained,
see a
yeah.
big problem. I think it's all about, well, how are you going? And well, it's great that there's additional support for you if you're challenged in that moment. And it also
Mm,
provides the other prompt about, parents as children get older and being able to try to share equal time as best they can, where capacity is also available, is around that respite, that component of rest, because you need it. It's already difficult enough, so you need time, to just take that breath and not, because what we see is burnout a lot, Ange. We see these
mm,
parents, these primary parents that have seeked out the NDIS and doing all the running around, end up in burnout because they're not only exhausting themselves out physically, but the emotional, the whole emotional tank is just so fueled up that they just find themselves so dysregulated. And that's when all the arguments and the not making good choices, not able to communicate, the disagreements on the minor things become more elevated.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Um, And what was I going to say then? Oh, even more so as well, the parent who sought out the NDIS, the administration that goes with it, the maintenance of the plan and the fund, it's quite in
hence.
depth and time consuming. So, and you really have to know the system. You have to know how NDIS works, and that takes time, and it takes effort. And when you're already depleted, emotionally, physically, mentally, and it's quite a challenge.
And it is misunderstood by the other parent. I think they don't quite realize there is a lot of work in it. But once you're in it, once the ball has started, the process has started and it's opened up, and then, you're usually nominated that caseworker, then there's still things that have to be reviewed over time, but at least, that it's all about acknowledging, okay, where can we work together to carry each other's weight, and in
Mm.
the ideal world, how wonderful will it be if a child is, for example, more escalated with one parent versus the other, or more likely to be violating rules, let's say with parent one. Can we call parent two to just say, can you just come, pick up little Johnny just for the morning, or do this morning run if it's possible, to take that pressure and that weight off.
And wouldn't that be ideal?
How
And I guess
wonderful.
that's Yeah, yeah. And that's where I guess I see a lot of value in when I take off my mediator hat and put my parenting coordinator hat on, because they've usually they have to have an agreement in place, but living that agreement is where the wheels, become unstuck, because those little things, those day-to-day hiccups that come along that haven't been, you know, addressed in an agreement, because you just can't. You can't address everything. Just how long's a piece of string? So,
Absolutely.
um, in the role of parenting coordinator, I'm able to say, well, okay, let's address this and this and this and this. These things have cropped up over the last fortnight. How can we approach that? Is this practical? Is this sustainable? Is this reasonable? We look at what's the reasonable person test. What would a reasonable person, think of, this request. So, if you could come and take Johnny to school one morning, or, etc. How can we cover this off so that we have a plan in place for the future, or there's an expectation that that arrangement is okay. So whilst it differs from the original agreement, it's a handshake arrangement, and I'm there to assist them to implement what it is they have to, and what it is that they want to additionally, because of the day-to-day things that crop up.
Ange, do you see more issues around where parents are also neurodiverse? So do you see that there's a more higher dysregulation, or difficulty around those parents being able to manage children that
Yeah,
have the
absolutely.
same?
Absolutely. What I'm seeing is that we've got a lot of diagnosed children, on the spectrum. And then once the children are diagnosed, the parents tend to look at themselves a little bit and do a bit of navel gazing, and they go off and then get tested, and quite often come back as, having uh,
Predicted.
additional needs as well. So it's not just working with them to, help them with their children and their agreements and parenting plans, etc. But it's helping them personally as well. And
Absolutely.
my approach has to fit who it is that I'm working with. So, these families have unique needs. They need clear and direct language. So, you have to be very succinct. And even the communication between the parents, I really advocate for using parenting apps, because I can be a third party um, overview person, and I can actually view all of the content of their messages that they exchange. But I can pick up when one party wants lots of detail, and the other party just spirals with detail. They're just like, oh my God, they can't see the wood for the trees, So getting the message in to the other party as it was intended isn't always achieved. And so that's where I can come in and say, look, we recognize that this is your communication style, but this is parent B's communication style, and it's just too much information. Can we break it down into dot points, etc.?
Yeah, and that's a
And
really good point. That's actually, sorry to interject, that's a really good point to make, because one of the comeback issues we have often is the midnight email. So these parents, parent A may have, may have taken longer to get the child to bed or children to bed. So that if especially if they're neurodiverse, and then they're sitting up at between 10 and midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and the other parent's asleep and their phone is going off if they're, and we get the call in the morning to say, oh my God, I've just got this 10-page email, and it's just blowing their mind, and even when they try to email with basic answers, parent one wants more than that. So there's this sort of disalignment between how are we talking together, which is probably what got them to the place of separation in the first place. How are we
yeah,
talking together so we can align and understand that one, two words, or a one sentence reply to your 10-page paragraph, if I may say, it is not to be avoidant or not to be offensive. I'm just giving you the short answer. And so there's a
because that's their capacity.
correct,
They've
correct.
that's just and I also find that with the apps as well, with having a third party, such as myself,
Big on
they're
the apps.
far more considered in what it is they actually put on paper as such. So
Yes,
they know that Big Brother, as
what a
scary as I
great
may
idea.
be, um, is watching. And so, if we've agreed that less is more and we want things in dot points, and one party just is still giving paragraphs, they know that I'm going to raise that. I'm going to
Yeah,
say, hey, this is what we agreed. Why are you insisting on doing this?
yeah,
What benefit is this to you? Because the other party is completely overwhelmed, and you know what? You're not going to achieve the result that you're hoping for
yeah. It's a
if you're
great
just
point.
overwhelming the other
Yeah,
party.
yeah, yeah. It's an excellent point, and these are the themes that we see often. It's that communication, and then the other parent says, "I know what they're coming back to me, but my answer's never good enough." Like there's a,
Mm,
and this is what we see. It's the breakdown of the answer. So you come in with one answer, then there's another 10-page email response to that answer, and they're coming back with the same answer. So then you suddenly have avoidance. No, it's
yes.
I'm no longer, or blocking the number because they're no longer emotionally coping. So
Yeah.
there's a spiral effect that goes on, and it's and what you said earlier, the uniqueness. Every matter needs to be treated. These families need to be treated for their merit, but it's also when they're coming for help, it's about them understanding what that looks like and trusting
Mm,
in that process.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
talk about
Absolutely.
the wheels falling off, Ange,
Yeah.
and your wheels plus I think the whole bracket just about collapsed for you. You want to share
Yep.
with
2 years
us?
ago.
So kind, yeah, and just you just share, like you and I've spoken obviously before. There's 5 children, correct, that are in your family
Yeah.
dynamic, and 4 of them are all neurodiverse. Is that right, if I remember?
Yeah, that's
And
right. And they have comorbid diagnoses as well, which is,
just to add,
typical.
just to add,
Yep, yep,
and then there's a massive shift in your family. So you guys are just traveling on really well as a blended family, doing incredibly awesome. But then there's a change in a shift in your family. Would you like to share like what that looked like,
yeah.
but again, the
So,
impact on the children? Yeah.
yep, yep. So, in September 2023, I was diagnosed with a very rare form of breast cancer, and it was a type that didn't respond to radiation or chemotherapy. So really, there was only one choice, and that was double mastectomy. So um, we went down that pathway. Unfortunately, I have, as recent as only a fortnight ago, underwent my 17th surgery in that period, which, as you can imagine, has meant a fair bit of downtime for me.
Yes.
It's impacted the family incredibly, but it's also it's made the family unit really resilient. It's the children have taken it in their stride, and it is phenomenal to see. I get goosebumps thinking about it. My husband's been incredibly supportive. Um, and he probably gets more emotional about the impact it's had on the family and myself than I do. But but yeah, the kids have been amazing.
Yeah.
As far as, because again, patterns are so important and routine and expectations and so forth. So, when mum goes off to the surgeon to have a checkup and then mum doesn't come home because I get added to the surgery list because, the infection is worse than we thought or whatnot. And they come home from school and, oh no, mum's staying in hospital tonight, that's a wheels fall off moment. And we
Yes.
did have that happen, a couple of times, but I guess as we've gone on and they see me cope with it, I have private moments of, oh my God, why is this happening to me? But most of the time, you know, we just keep going. So they 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 really their ability to uh, cope with change and last minute change has really developed, and their resilience has really developed. So they know that they can go to school and they can do everything normal, and mum's got her stuff sorted. So, if there's if you go to something that's going to be a huge impact to the family, we'll talk about it. They support each other. I've seen a huge change, I guess, in the relationship, especially between our youngest and our oldest, who typically at loggerheads on everything, two girls, both my biological children, and they're 10 years apart. And they actually working together. So, if the older one drives so she can go and pick up, the little one. And they've just stood up to the challenges that, have become what it is. I some days, I've got drains that I have to carry around with me, etc. And yeah, I mean, I managed to even go to the Pink concert with my youngest daughter with four drains hanging out of me in a backpack that I wore on my front. So you just keep going.
And at the time when all this was coming out for you, what were the worries about the children at that time? Like in that moment?
Yeah. I mean, whenever you say cancer, even the youngest of children immediately know it's not good. And so I know with our children in particular, catastrophizing was a huge concern for me, and it did happen, where they just think mum's going to die, and that's it. So talking with them around, the processes that I was undertaking
Yeah.
medically, and how I was approaching that, etc., and being quite clear about it, I think really helped them to understand, and it took away a lot of the fear that they had. So, I mean, you've got some people that are loath to provide lots of detail to their children, and everybody has reasons for doing so or not. In our case, they crave detail and information, and they want to know, dotting the i's, crossing the t's, etc. So being able to answer their questions as honestly as I could was really important and helped them to adjust, I suppose, because it has been a huge adjustment.
Has it been an ongoing adjustment, do you believe? Like, do you feel like it's been
Yeah.
tweaking along the way? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, from from anything from, fatigue to my hair going curly. Who'd have thought?
Amazing.
Um, I've never had a curl in my life. Now I've got curly
Amazing.
hair. And the medication that I have to take and the impact it's had on my eyesight, for example. There's a direct link between my medication and my eyesight, and it's constantly evolving. It's not one thing; it's something else.
And now with the children, like what are the things that have surprised you about the kids in terms of their survival in your survival?
Mm.
What has brushed off onto them?
Yeah, well, I know, Archer, he's 16 now, and I would get up at 6 o'clock every morning and run him to the train station. He's very risk adverse, very, very risk adverse. Everything's going to kill him. And, fear of God about lots of things. He's now decided to walk to the train station, and that's because he wants me to have a sleep in. And he's took it on board himself to face his own fear, and do that. Lily is 15. She raised $1,700 for breast cancer, and reached out to friends and family and got a special uniform exemption at school so that she could wear a pink ribbon in her hair for the month that she was fundraising for, which is amazing.
Beautiful story.
My eldest daughter, yeah, my eldest daughter, who's 25, she's stepped up to the plate as well and is doing a lot more. Our middle daughter, Alyssa, she is very, very helpful in getting the kids to their extracurricular activities and things like that. So always asking, can I get something? Can I help you? Just those sorts of things. They're conscious. They're always conscious that um, no matter how I look or what I'm saying, I'm still adjusting myself to what life is like for me now.
And has that brought like a sense of closeness between all of you, like a new level of appreciation? And has it also in that when you look at the component of the neurodiverse with all the children, has that surprised you in terms of how the sky's the limit? Like there's, you've only got, it's more about our mindset and our attitude towards what we think is more of a limitation is actually possibly the explosion for more learning and being able to reach to better heights than what we give them credit for. Do you think that's something that has sort of jilted you a little bit through this whole process?
Without doubt, without doubt, it's shocking in a good way,
Yes.
to see the growth that they've had, and I guess the closeness that has been a byproduct of having to. They've all got me in common as their mum or stepmother, so they've been able to support each other on that journey. Yeah,
Makes you proud, doesn't it? Makes me proud
it
of you
does.
all just listening to this story. And I guess why it's important for listeners as well, that, we're all human. We've got our stuff going on. But I think the element of also understanding how important it is that when those wheels do fall off, if we have some level of collaboration, with the other parent, whether they're in the same home or not, it makes those points of crisis where the parts of life where we don't have control over to really come
Mm.
together when it's needed. I think that's your beautiful example of that, where you're a mother, professional person, running businesses, wife and stepmom, blended family, all those things, but in all, life just handed you something that was unexpected, but you've taken
Yeah.
that. And because those fundamentals have been in place, the this new pathway of collaborating with the children and them growing and elevating, I think has been just a great example why, trying to get right parenting plans and really trying to have a much deeper understanding of us as humans as opposed to demanding of each other could really
Mm,
assist and help, for those surprises along the way.
yeah, without doubt.
And you're amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing
Thank
that
you.
story too, because it's important that we're all human and, we're quite brave, I feel, at this level where we are. We've got stuff going on, but we're still trying to help parents understand that there's better ways to go around things and to really just make your life, exceptional. Want to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Ange, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for all the viewers that have watched in. And we will be definitely back for the next podcast really soon. Ange, you've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. If you or someone you know could do with our help, please book that free consultation at Parenting Together Apart for Parents Not Together. Remember, you don't need to do this alone. We'll look forward to meeting you soon.